Hello and welcome to Coffee and Conversation here on BTCN. I'm your host, Shashank Bengali, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by Michelle Price. She's the CEO of the Australian Cybersecurity Growth Network, or AustCyber. Michelle, thanks very much for being with us.
It's great to be here.
So tell us what brought you to the RSA conference this year? What were you hoping to achieve?
We've got a couple of companies that we support to grow out of Australia coming up to RSA APJ to show this region of the world what great stuff they're building in cybersecurity. We've got 15 companies on our delegation and 6 of them are exhibiting right now over at the Early Stage Expo as part of RSA.
And can you just paint for us a picture to start off with? What is the current state of cybersecurity readiness in Australia, in the broader Southeast Asian region? Just give us a picture.
So from our own conception, Australia is a little bit behind the rest of the Western world. But when we come to the Indo-Pacific, Australia is probably sitting somewhere in the middle. And of course, Singapore being one of the more advanced countries around cybersecurity for its economy. But there are lots of countries in this part of the world that are behind Australia. And certainly that's part of what our projection is into the world, that Australia being a trusted country to do business with, particularly around cybersecurity, that there's lots of great business that we can do in the Indo-Pacific.
So in Australia, what are the main cybersecurity concerns? What keeps the companies that you work with up at night?
So cyber attack, of course, is one of the main things that keeps people awake at night. Ransomware in Australia is a really big concern. Of course, it is globally, but Australia being one of the richest countries in the world per capita makes us a prime target for cybercrime. And ransomware, we're one of the top nations in the world globally around the rate of attack against the smallest of our companies as well as the largest companies. I think also as we've got the convergence of technology happening, vulnerabilities are turning up in a lot of legacy systems. And so network architecture resilience is a really big concern. But also at the individual level, how much the behaviour of humans within the workplace, being sort of one of the weaker links, if you say it like that, that's a big concern as well, making sure that the workforce across the economy is alivened to the importance of cybersecurity.
And what's the level of damage that these kinds of attacks can inflict? And what's the level of investment that we've seen from governments and private industry to fight this?
Yeah, so obviously a pretty significant cyber attack can end a company. You know, it can damage a reputation of a company, so it loses suppliers and customers. And we have had a number of companies in Australia that have folded because they've not been able to respond to a cyber incident. But we've also got a range of companies that are investing well in their cyber resilience, and we're seeing that increase across the economy as more and more companies become aware of the benefits of investing in cybersecurity. So it is highly contextual as to how much people are investing in cyber capability, but it seems to be proportionate. We're looking at around about 5 to 10% of budgets being now spent on cybersecurity capabilities in the country. And that's fairly consistent across government agencies as well as companies, small and large. And of course, we need to remember that universities too are enterprises and they're one of the highest targets in Australia.
So give us some examples. How are some of the tools being developed in Australia? How are they being used to fight cybercrime as well as traditional crime?
Yeah, sure. So we've got some great capabilities, of course, being built in Australia. At the very pointy end of the equation, when we look at the sort of defence and intelligence space, we've got some companies that are developing some globally unique capabilities going into the traditional theatres of war, as cyberspace is used as a vector for war like any other domain of war. At the other end of the scale, though, we've got some great companies that are developing some tools that can be used by everyday companies, and they include, protection for websites against malicious bot activity. We've got some great companies doing some threat hunting activity, and also around cyber incident and response. So that's the traditional sort of managed service provider end of the scale that are doing things in a slightly different way.
And of course, for AustCyber, you've spoken about one of your main goals is to export this technology outside of Australia. So talk to us a bit about that. What of these tools have been applied elsewhere already so far?
Yeah, so we've got over 300 companies in our portfolio now of Australian cybersecurity companies, and more than 50% of them are exporting to different destinations around the world. What we know is that that's happening not just because of the uplift around cybersecurity everywhere across the globe. It's because Australians are seen as being great partners to do business with in the provision of cybersecurity capability. So it's actually across the real spectrum of cybersecurity capabilities that we're seeing being exported.
And which of those do you think, as you look at the Singapore context, which of these technologies could be best used in Singapore, and how would Singapore, work with AustCyber to kind of enhance cooperation there?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually seeing a huge market opportunity here in Singapore around the technologies that have been developed to make it easier to train a workforce around cybersecurity. So a number of our companies are already exporting to here and looking at developing deep partnerships with Singaporean government, but also Singaporean private sector.
So you're talking about a whole new sector of the economy that's growing not only in Australia, but around the region, around the world. What changes do you see happening in terms of education to build that next generation of cybersecurity employees?
Yeah, so cybersecurity as a profession is experiencing one of the most significant shortages globally. Right now, it's estimated that there's around about 3 million job vacancies in cybersecurity. So if I was anyone out there, I'd be wanting to get into cyber now because the salaries are pretty good, given that there is a significant shortage. To solve that shortage, though, there is a significant need in many countries to focus on the formal education side. So what are the skills and competencies we need to be delivering to students as young as primary school, right back into the 5 and 6 year old space to deliver that pipeline of workers for tomorrow. But also for the existing workforce, it's about making sure that there are the right kinds of micro-credentials available for them to be able to transition quickly out of their existing careers into a new career in cybersecurity. We need workers from across the full spectrum of skills. It's not just about the deep tech, it's also about the non-technical space, including areas like business management, risk management, law, strategy, policy, the whole works. So no matter what your interest is, there's going to be a great job for you in cybersecurity. And so the workers of tomorrow are going to have a full suite of choices around what kinds of jobs they go into involving cybersecurity. So
not just new avenues, but also existing avenues that are tailored more toward the cyber jobs of the future.
Indeed, because we need, your country needs you is what we say. There's really a strong sense of career path for cybersecurity because you can take it in any direction you want to take it. Whether it's an entrepreneur looking to solve a problem in cybersecurity, either on the technical side or the non-technical side, right through to the deep science of cybersecurity and emerging technologies around cybersecurity and quantum encryption, for example. The convergence of cybersecurity with AI and machine learning, there's a strong relationship there. So the full space needs people now as well as tomorrow. So if you're advising a young person, say in high school or early college, what are the jobs in the next 5-10 years in this space, what would you tell them? I'd be telling them to study whatever they want to study because it's actually curiosity and the ability to solve puzzles that we need most in cybersecurity. One of the best cybersecurity analysts that I know in Australia right now did a PhD in music because music is all about pattern analysis. And that creativity that comes from seeing things from a different lens altogether, like music, into cybersecurity, that's actually a happy marriage for us. And so it's following your passions and then following those passions into cybersecurity that makes the best cybersecurity professionals on the planet. Fascinating. Well, that's really interesting to hear and good to know for the future. Thank you so much for joining us here on Coffee and Conversation on BTCN. I'm your host, Shashank Bengali, and we'll see you next time.